Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Dr. Diamond Ford. I am an assistant professor here in the English department at UNC Asheville. And it's my sincere pleasure to welcome our Goodman Endowed visiting writer, Deesha Philyaw. We are so lucky to be able to welcome accomplished writers like Philyaw to our campus. Opportunities like this wouldn't be possible without the continued support of the Goodman Fund, which allows our department to bring two incredible contemporary authors throughout the academic year to perform in the fall and spring to our larger Asheville community. Without the Goodmans and their continued support, none of us could be here tonight. I also want to thank Malaprop's Bookstore and Cafe for graciously co-sponsoring our event this evening. Malaprop's is a valuable cornerstone of the literary community here in Asheville and has been since 1982. Their support has guaranteed books for purchase in the back tonight, which Philyaw has graciously agreed to sign following our event. Without the professional support of Malaprop staff like Patricia and Justin, this event could not have been possible. Thanks too to the events and marketing staff who helped contribute to the logistical success of this evening, to our video production manager, Kent Thompson, for his technological assistance, and to all of you who have braved the spring storms to be here. Thank you. Tonight's event will feature a reading, a brief Q&A, and a book signing from our esteemed guest, Deesha Philyaw. I am so lucky to be introducing Philyaw to all of you this evening. When I first encountered Philyaw's debut short story collection, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, I was reminded of June Jordan, in particular, her lecture and essay, Where is the Love?, in which Jordan argues for an evaluation of all personal, political, and literary engagements through love's language and learning. Love, Jordan writes, is a steady state, deep caring, and respect for every other human being. Quote, as I think about anyone or anything, whether history or literature or my father or political organizations or a poem or a film, as I seek to evaluate the potentiality, the life, supportive commitment possibilities of anyone or anything, the decisive question is always, where is the love? There is love in Philyaw's writing. And it is a love so tender and careful, so raucous and ready, it can ruin and repair you too. I cried the first time I read Eula, the short story that opens the collection, a short story about two women and longtime friends who spend the Y2K New Year's together, intimate, but hemmed from the wholeness of each other because one of them is too afraid to pursue a love not normal. I found within the pages of this book a familiarness I wasn't really ready for, like a well-placed mirror or a timed hand reaching out after I tumbled down, because The Secret Lives of Church Ladies is a love letter to Black women, each character rendered in the collection through wit and audacity with deep integrity, insight, and love, but also the muscled deftness of craft. Like a dancer on a high wire, Philyaw's pen performs along the tightrope act of critical and caring. It is impossible to walk away from this book and not feel stunned, awed even, tasked to carry the lives of these women forever with you, not ghost, no, not the Black body rendered a haunting, but embodiment so palpable, so outside the invisibilities that the world makes of Black women's needs that you wonder how you have ever lived in a world without this knowing. Philyaw writes characters with a knowing so profound and necessary that it reminds me of the first time I read Gloria Naylor's The Women of Brewster Place. But I suppose that connection is too obvious. Perhaps it is better to say that Philyaw builds her own legacy of love through writing, shines a luminous cast brilliant against our culture of silence, a silence imposed sometimes through uncritical allegiance to faith, but most times in the legacies of white supremacy and the erasure of Black women's personal truths. As the closing statement in an interview with Boston.com, Philyaw offers this observation, quote, Too often, stories about us actually marginalize us. Stories that center us as we are thriving, pursuing freedom, pursuing pleasure, imagining, exploring, being fully human, being quirky, being messy. We need all of these stories. The fullness of who we are, the striving and the struggling, should be reflected in literature that centers us and our experiences. Tonight, we return the favor Philyaw has given us by centering her work and her brilliance. It is sure to be an experience worth remembering. Deesha Philyaw's debut short story collection, The Secret Life of Church Ladies, won the 2021 PEN Faulkner Award for Fiction, the 2021 Short Story Prize, and the 2020 LA Times Book Prize, the Art Seidenbaum Award for First Fiction, and was a finalist for the 2020 National Book Award for Fiction. Philyaw is a Kimbilio Fiction Fellow, a Baldwin for the Arts Fellow, a United States Artists Fellow, and co-host of 2 podcasts, Ursa Short Fiction with Donnie Walton, and Reckon True Stories with Kiese Lehman. She is currently at work developing TV shows based on her short fiction. Deesha's debut novel, The True Confessions of First Lady Freeman, is forthcoming from Mariner Books, an imprint of HarperCollins in 2026. Please join me in welcoming Deesha Philyaw to the stage. Y'all, I need a minute. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Diamond, for seeing me and seeing my work, and knowing that even one person feels and sees themselves in the work makes all of the work, it makes it worth it. As I am literally in the midst of editing the book, the True Confessions novel that Diamond mentioned. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to University of North Carolina, Asheville, and Malaprop's Bookstore, who has been a huge supporter of Church Ladies for 5 years, the 5 years since it's been out. I love that you cited June Jordan in that particular poem about love. One of the dearest loves of my life, Vanessa German, is here on the front row. Vanessa has been my friend since before there was Church Ladies, a Pittsburgh friend. We go back to Pittsburgh days, but she is a treasure here in your community, in the mountains outside of Asheville as a visual artist. And whenever we're in each other's cities, we come and love on each other. So thank you for being here, Vanessa. So I'm just stealing some time to catch my breath. Thank you. I am obviously obsessed with Church Ladies because I can't stop writing about them. As Diamond mentioned, the title of my forthcoming novel is The True Confessions of First Lady Freeman. And for those who may not know, the Black church's tradition is to refer to the pastor's wife as the first lady of the church. And so my main character, her name is Charisse. She goes by Char. She is a very unlikely first lady. In this first chapter, Pageant Night, she introduces you to herself, so I don't have to say too much more by way of introduction of this book or Charisse. I'm going to read the first chapter to you, and then, as Diamond said, we'll have Q&A. Pageant Night. A Proverbs 31 woman is the Beyonce of evangelicals. She rocks T-shirts and drinks from coffee mugs that declare, "I am a Proverbs 31 woman." I'll pause here to say, this story is set in 2010, so think Obama's first term, okay? That's where we are. We are 15 years ago. She rocks T-shirts and drinks from coffee mugs that declare, "I'm a Proverbs 31 woman." Her babies wear bibs with "My mommy is a Proverbs 31 woman" printed on them. Her husband drives a car with a "Keep calm and marry a Proverbs 31 woman" bumper sticker. In an unlikely twist of fate in the early 1990s, I became a Proverbs 31 woman, but not just any Proverbs 31 woman. I became the ultimate Proverbs 31 woman by marrying the pastor of one of the largest Black megachurches in America. I wasn't yet 23. My prefrontal cortex hadn't fully developed, so of course I thought I'd won the lottery. Fast forward 18 years, and here I am, backstage at the Mrs. First Lady USA pageant, poised to take home the crown. I've spent most of these 18 years unabashedly coveting the Mrs. First Lady USA title. Both the New and Old Testaments list covetousness as a sin. I'm guilty as charged, but also washed in the blood, so it all balanced out. Finally, I got my chance to compete in the by invitation only pageant, which features 12 contestants, like Jesus' 12 disciples, all of us pastors' wives, AKA First Ladies. The way I picture it, becoming Mrs. First Lady USA would be my life's pièce de résistance, the great equalizer between me and the other First Ladies who, as the daughters and granddaughters and great-granddaughters of pastors, deacons, assistant deacons, Sunday school teachers, and other proper church folk who were born with respectable spoons in their mouths, the pageant snubbed me for the first 5 years of eligibility, in part because I couldn't trace my family's church membership back to the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, and in part because the space on my birth certificate marked father's name is blank. Yet, you best believe I've got the audacity, the pure, unmitigated gall to parade around in this life and on this stage tonight like I belong here, like I fucking own it. I got invited to compete this year thanks to a changing of the guard in pageant leadership, namely Nate and Nikki Bailey, 25-year-old 420-friendly millennial twins who recently told People magazine that they like my vibrations. Nate and Nikki's grandparents, Reverend and Mrs. Charles Bailey, established the pageant in 1961 after their 16-year-old daughter, Natalie, missed her debutante ball due to a mysterious illness that necessitated a 9-month stay at an unspecified specialty clinic in California where her aunt just happened to live. 2 years later, after Natalie married a local preacher, Reverend and Mrs. Bailey hosted the first Mrs. First Lady USA pageant, rigged in Natalie's favor, of course. In 1980, the minimum age to compete was raised to 35 after a newly crowned winner was quietly dethroned when pageant officials learned that the married teen was 16, not 18, as she had claimed. No criminal charges were filed against her then 45-year-old husband, who is still in the pulpit today. I first heard about the pageant from Lady May, my late mother-in-law. She'd competed in 1980 but didn't win and declined future invitations to compete. Honey, those Baileys are something else, she told me. Never met a paper bag test they didn't like. All the winners are light-skinned, I'd ask. Not all, but enough of them for me to not waste my time again. The pageant is held annually here in Belton, Georgia, Nate and Nikki's hometown, and mine too, in the 1,000-seat Belton Music Hall. And in the book itself, there's a footnote here. Belton, Georgia, population 55,919, is located 30 miles southeast of Atlanta. Notable Beltonians, besides David and me, include the uncredited scriptwriter behind the 1980s "Oh No, My Brother, You Got to Get Your Own" commercial for the Hey Love album. Just an aside. Before the Bailey twins took over, I'd been shut out of both the pageant and the unofficial sorority of First Ladies. But my age, I'm 15 years younger than David, and lack of good church girl bona fides aren't the only reasons I'm the odd woman out tonight. 11 of the 12 of us competing have an especially not so great history, and the pageant has been a reunion of sorts. 10 years ago, I organized a trip to Honolulu, a sacred and sensual couples retreat sponsored by the Pure Passion sex toy company, except I had to spin it as a marital AIDS company. Honolulu proved to be the nail in the coffin of my admission into the sorority of megachurch First Ladies. You'd think antibiotics and a decade would have cleared things up between these ladies and me, but you would be wrong. These daughters of Jack and Jill, these purveyors of godly womanhood, these long-suffering brides of Kappas and Alphas, these wearers of lace front wigs and Louboutins, these women really didn't fuck with me. I was with them, but not of them. In their eyes, I was unworthy of their friendship, their sisterhood, their company, and most certainly of the Mrs. First Lady USA title. Even if I win tonight, the victory will be bittersweet. For the record, I've never been a fan of the Black church's insistence on treating pastors like heads of state and referring to their wives as first ladies. It's not that deep. But along with the Prada and stiletto steez and other trappings of this gig, I've taken the moniker in stride. I'm not a fan of hierarchies in general, and I've always felt conflicted about having my lifestyle funded by the poor and meek who, though slated to inherit heaven and earth respectively, can barely afford their rent, and who worship a God I'm not entirely sure I believe in. I'm definitely not on speaking terms with him, but for nearly 20 years, I've kept those feelings and doubts locked up tighter than the Tiffany bracelets in my biometric safe. Assistant stage manager Vanessa pops her gorgeous head adorned with super short platinum curls into the doorway of my dressing room. "You're up in 5, she says. I nod. For the talent portion of tonight's pageant, I've spent the last 9 months scripting and perfecting a dramatic scriptural recitation/comedy routine celebrating the Proverbs 31 woman, AKA the evangelical Queen Bee, a whimsical commentary on this oft-referenced how-to manual for good Christian wives. While the modern-day Proverbs 31 woman does not spin wool or flax, she is expected to spin any and all unpleasant narratives about who she is into something more palatable. So I have. Mine is a rags to Rolex story titled Love Like This, the Reverend David and Mrs. First Lady Sharice Freeman story, co-authored by my soon-to-be ex-husband and adapted into an unauthorized Lifetime original movie starring Sanaa Lathan and Keith David. From my graduation from Yale to our whirlwind courtship and fairy tale wedding on Creflo Dollar's yacht, to the birth of our daughter Gabrielle, to the launch of our custom line of dishware sold exclusively at Dillard's, Love Like This is a raw, in-depth look at everything David and I were comfortable with the general public knowing about us. President Obama listed it as one of his favorite books of the year. That man deserves a second term. I'm claiming it now. David and I completed our transformation from couple to brand with the introduction of Freeman's Own Ranch into the national salad dressing market, where it regularly sells out in public stores throughout the Southeast. Then came the invitation to vie for the Mrs. First Lady USA title a year later. But tonight's postscript to this journey isn't at all how I imagined it would be. I thought it would be the 12 of us contestants together, caught up in the cozy, adrenaline-fueled frenzy of friendly competition while I played the new Jill Scott album from my iPod to set the mood. I thought my newly restored best friend Petra would be beside me, ranting her Cockney accent in full effect about how beauty standards are a load of patriarchal codswallop, as Mimi, my makeup artist, applied eyelash adhesive. I imagined defying the pageant's 2-assistant rule and smuggling in Gabrielle, the world's most uptight, almost 17-year-old who would hover in judgment over my decision to wear false eyelashes. I'd tell Gabrielle to relax, and I'd apologize to Petra again and tell her she was right about everything, including me, especially me. If this pageant had a being a self-absorbed fraud of a friend category, I'd get 10s across the board. So here I am alone, except for Mimi, who's playing Angry Birds on her phone, in a janitor's closet cum dressing room, waiting for Vanessa to pop in and give me my cues between segments. The other contestants voted 10-1 to kick me out of the pageant for conduct unbecoming a first lady involving another woman's husband. But the Bailey twins, with TV ratings gold and sponsorship dollars in their eyes, refused to let me go. I was voted out of the dressing room instead. The truth is, I'm completely innocent of these accusations. My knowing the truth doesn't make this moment any less lonely, though. It's complicated. Unfortunately, half the people on this side of the grave who know the truth are no longer speaking to me, or they won't be after tonight, and I'm ready for the fallout that's coming. I got my big girl panties on. By competing, I had hoped to redeem myself in the eyes of my fellow contestants and gain their respect. I was so close. Before my scandale horrible broke, the other wives had finally started to warm up to me, Even Daphne Lancaster, and she's colder than a witch's tit. See, the downside of marrying a pastor 15 years older than me is that most of his peers' wives are also older, and since day one, they've whispered nasty things about me like child bride. David doesn't fraternize, his word, much with the Gen X pastors and wives who are around my age. He fancies himself the younger pastor's elder and mentor. Pastors like Daphne's husband, Reverend Jetta Lancaster, who is single-handedly responsible for ruining my life. But I'm starting to think maybe my life as it was needed to be ruined so that it could become real. And shit's about to get real tonight. With 4 categories of the pageant down and 1 to go, I know I'm favored among the judges, handpicked by the Baileys to win tonight. It helps that my scandal has played well with the younger demographic. Nate and Nikki have packed the audience with members of Millennials for the Messiah. I'm not that much younger than their mothers, but these kids have decided that I'm cooler than the other first ladies. In the Sunday Best Hat competition, my replica of a beehive, complete with fake bees in the hive's orbit, that got a standing ovation. For the verse memorization contest, I drew from the fishbowl Psalm 119, the longest chapter in the Bible, and recited all 176 verses flawlessly. My impassioned speech championing a local rehab center for women and their children, my social impact initiative, which is Millennial Speak for Community Service Project, that garnered the most applause, way more than Daphne's speech about her project, Wigs for Widows, whatever that is. And in the trivia portion, I drew a softball question. How often is God good? The answer, as all Black saints and ain'ts know, all the time. Thank you. Nate and Nikki have strategically slated me to perform last in the talent competition. To claim the crown, all I have to do is bite my tongue and keep the secrets of 2 terrible men, one dead, the other Belton's first Black mayor. What would a Proverbs 31 woman do? She would do the noble thing. She would just stick to the script. I have no intention of sticking to the script. Vanessa appears in the doorway again. You're up in 2, she says. I stand, dressed in Mom's Maybelline's trademark floral housecoat, Argyle knee socks, and brogans. I tuck my shoulder-length locks beneath Mom's signature floppy knit hat and take one last look in the mirror. My frumpy costume clashes with the glamour of my face. Stage lights, Mimi had explained as she applied foundation. Stage lights are unforgiving. She's beaten my heart-shaped face to the gods, given me a smoky eye, and arched my eyebrows to not quite Disney villainess. My lips, candy apple red, of course. As a total package, flawless dark brown skin, long curly locks, 5'6", thick in all the right places, I look like I will steal your man. In the Mom's Mabley getup, I look like I'll take him home and make him a big country breakfast. From the vanity, I pick up a Cabernet-colored leather-bound Bible engraved with my first name. Then I follow Vanessa to the wings of the stage. On stage, Daphne is finishing her wildly uninspired rendition of Jolene. She's decked out in a mid-length floral Dior dress that accentuates her busty chest and snatched waist. With her 5-inch Jimmy Choo platform sandals, she's giving school marm chic. Never before has so much pretty been so wasted. Polite applause follows Daphne off stage. With a toss of her long auburn bombshell waves, she shoulder checks me as she brushes past. Vanessa pretends not to see and mouths, "Hot mic," as she nudges me toward the spotlight. I take my mark at center stage, next to a stool where I set my Bible down and get right to it. Good evening. I'm Sharice Freeman, First Lady of Hope in Christ Baptist Church, and let's be honest, the reason most of you are here, in person or among the estimated 1.2 million viewers watching at home. Proof there's no such thing as bad publicity. The predictable murmuring begins. The glare of the spotlight keeps me from seeing Gabrielle in the front row, but I know she's there, chafing at people's stares and whispers. She's barely speaking to me. Her father, insistent on a public united front, made her come. But by night's end, he won't be speaking to me either. Effortlessly fine. David is probably wearing a Hugo Boss suit without a tie, the kind of look that compelled the internet to crown him #Pastor Bay. My arch nemesis, Hope in Christ head of women's ministries, Sheila Battle, is probably seated front row center wearing an ill-fitted bad floral print from Ross Dress for Less. Sheila has tried to bully me since the day we met. Like everyone else, she expects me to lose tonight. So wherever she is, I'm sure Sheila's saltier than Lot's wife right now. But I will prevail. No kitten heel formed against me shall prosper. I grabbed the mic off the stand. For those of you who don't know me, I was born and raised right here in Belton, Georgia. I'm from the east side of Belton, you know, where the girls are easy. I drawl. I shield my eyes and peer into the audience. You local church folk here tonight from the west side, that's what y'all say about us, right? The murmuring intensifies as I remove one of the brogans. I nod. Right. I'm an east side girl, like my mama, who was 15 years old when she had me, and like my Aunt Marie, who cared for me after my mama died when I was 13. I dedicate this performance to them and to Jackie Moms Mabley, whose signature style I have recreated tonight. I remove the other brogan. Those of you of a certain age may remember Moms Mabley as a raunchy lesbian Chitlin Circuit comedian. But did you know her career spanned more than 50 years and she was the country's first successful female comic? My mother was a fan of Moms Mabley. She would crack up sharing some of Mom's comedy bits with me, but they went right over my head as a kid. In college, though, I wrote my senior thesis, a socio-cultural analysis of Moms Mabley's performance as resistance in honor of my mother. Moms Mabley was born in North Carolina in 1894. I removed my hat and let it drop at my feet. My locks cascade over my shoulders. At age 11, she was raped by an elderly black man. And at 13, she was raped by a white sheriff. Both times she was impregnated and gave birth to the babies. The audience gasps. I remove my socks. The children moms bore after she was raped were given up for adoption. When Moms was 14, her mama's boyfriend tried to pressure her into marrying an older man. Her grandmother encouraged her to run away instead. Moms listened and ran to join a black vaudeville-style minstrel show. She got her nickname from the motherly way she looked after fellow performers. I unbuttoned the top button of my house coat. The historical record doesn't tell us how Moms was viewed by the community she fled, but her story is as old as time. Y'all know how it goes. She led those men on. Dressed like she was asking for it. She was a fast-tail girl, an easy girl, and men just can't help themselves. That's why their mamas must warn them about girls and women. I undo another button. Proverbs 31, verses 1 through 9, introduce us to a mother who has a warning for her son, the mother of King Lemuel. According to some biblical commentators and Jewish legend, Lemuel is actually Solomon, which would mean his mother was Bathsheba and his father, King David. And Bathsheba would know a few things about lust and power and ruin. Evangelicals like to romanticize the story of David and Bathsheba, but scholars call it what it was, rape. But the church doesn't care about those particulars any more than it cares about those first 9 verses of Proverbs 31, the verses preceding the blueprint for the aspirational Proverbs 31 woman who sews her own clothes and never sleeps. What do those first 9 verses say? I undo another button. I'll give you the Cliff's Notes. Solomon's mother tells him to speak up for people who can't speak for themselves and to defend the rights of the poor and needy. But she also tells him this in verse 3. Do not spend your strength on women, your vigor on those who ruin kings. Some interpret this as a warning not to be led astray or manipulated by women. Others read it more progressively as a caution against carnal excess in general. Solomon, for his part, had hundreds of wives and hundreds of concubines. So much for listening to mama. I chuckle. No one makes a peep. Then Bathsheba, we presume, Bathsheba goes on to describe for her son in detail the kind of wife he should have. The entire chapter, we're told, is an oracle, a revelation from God. This isn't just the king's mama's opinion. No, we're to believe this is what God himself believes about us, about women, that we are to be virtuous workhorses, noble, chaste, I continue unbuttoning, compliant, selfless, forever defined by our service to others. I undo the last button, take an apple from my pocket, and let the housecoat drop. I'm naked, save for 3 fake green maple leaves covering my nipples and my crotch. I'm not supposed to be here. Jesus, someone shouts, and I can't tell if they're scandalized, impressed, or turned on by me. The cameramen crane their necks to catch Nate and Nikki's attention. Behind me, I hear the sound guy stage whisper, "Cut her mic." In the sound booth to my right, Nate and Nikki appear to mouth in unison, "No fucking way." Something shatters backstage. Daphne screeches, "She fucking ruins everything." In the audience, I hear a lot of rustling and rebukes questioning my sanity. I think some people are heading for the exits. Otherwise, it's silent. I'm not supposed to be in this pageant, and I'm not supposed to be living this charmed life, I say. Because y'all write off girls like my mama as fast, as easy, code for whore, which is what my mother's mother called her when she found out she was pregnant with me. Y'all shame those girls you believe grown men are helpless to resist. And I was supposed to carry the shame my mother felt like a badge of dishonor. I picked up the Bible from the stool and walked to the edge of the stage. Make no mistake, there is something shameful afoot here in Belton, but it ain't me. A good, godly man like my husband, I snickered. He's not supposed to want a girl like me, not to marry anyway. But he did marry me and made me the first runner-up to the true love of his life, the church. My husband would have you believe he's a better preacher, better husband, a better man than Jetta Lancaster. Like so many so-called men of God, he's no better. Because when faced with the choice between doing what's right and protecting other men doing evil at the expense of women, they will choose each other every time. Because women, Bathsheba, Moms Mabley, my mother, me, we're all just collateral damage in men's wars for self-preservation and dominance. I clutched the Bible to my chest. No, this East Side girl isn't supposed to be here, but here I am. I raised my apple. To the so-called whores and to their daughters, I yell, may we inherit the earth and enjoy an endless fount of wine to forget our troubles. For you, for us, and for our mamas, I'm here tonight to tell the truth. I take a bite of the apple and begin. Thank you. Oh, you have the mic for questions. All right. Questions?
Thank you so much. That was riveting.
Thank you.
Who else should we read?
Oh, so many people. Kiese Layman has just been, was mentioned earlier. His memoir, Heavy, has been noted as one of the best books of the century, but that's not why you should read it. It's a healing book, and it's one of the bravest things I've ever read. He also has an essay collection called How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America, and his novel is Long Division. And then last month, he released a picture book called City Summer, Country Summer, about Black boys and safeness. and it's beautifully written, and just the illustrations are gorgeous too. I'll also shout out my other co-host who was mentioned tonight, Donnie Walton, who is working on another novel, but her first novel is the final revival of Opal and Nev, which is a kind of faux oral history. If you've ever read one of the Rolling Stone oral histories, this is about a Black woman who is this sort of pop funk rock icon named Opal Jewel, who has a very brief career, and the novel is about her life, and it's sort of a story within a story, all fiction. Donnie, she did that. Great audiobook as well. Who else? Jamila Minix wrote an incredible book called Moonrise over New Jessup. This is a hard question because I want to shout out all my friends. Let's see, who else? Dante Stewart. I'm just trying to do fiction, nonfiction. Dante's book is Shouting in the Fire, an American Epistle, and he talks about religion and race and white supremacy. Let's do some poetry. Yona Harvey, everything Yona Harvey has ever written. She has 2 collections, and she's also working on a new collection and some nonfiction. Her collections are Hemming the Waters and You Don't Have to Go to Mars for Love. Gosh, I'll just pick one more. How about Robert Jones Jr., another good friend of mine, a book called The Prophets, Robert's debut novel about 2 enslaved men on I believe it's a Mississippi plantation, who are lovers. And you can imagine that the challenges there. I'll stop there. I could use the whole time to answer that question. Yes.
I have an answer for that question, and it's just a follow. I'm not sure if you do follow the Free Black Women's Library. Yeah, because she always does these reading lists of authors.
Hola.
Hi, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed your reading.
Thank you.
And I felt like the eating the apple in that type of setting was very badass in my way. But my question is, I think as a writer, you always want people to have a response to your book, and everybody kind of has a different response or outcome. But what do you expect readers to kind of perceive or kind of feel after reading your book?
The novel?
Yes.
I hope people laugh. That's the first thing. It is writing humor is so hard, especially, if things don't land. And my editor and my agent, who's an editorial agent, so she reads like an editor also, they never comment this isn't funny. If something's really funny, they'll LOL or whatever. But I'm always looking in the white space, which is when there's something funny and they don't comment at all. I'm like, I don't think that was funny. So then I get all worried. So first, laughter. And then also, I hope people then stick around for Shar, her struggle in terms of getting real, because I think that a lot of us are performing. In this novel, I'm poking at the church's performance, church women's performance at the behest of men. But I hope that people, as they did with Church Ladies, thankfully, it wasn't viewed as I'm just skewering the church or it's some sort of attempt at a takedown of the church. I'm hoping that it causes all of us to reflect on the ways that maybe we are performing and not being real, and what is it going to take for us to stop doing that. And sometimes it takes something really catastrophic, like what happens for Shar, to finally get real. So, for all of us, if it's not the church, if it's not how, we dress and show up and the pageantry of being alive at this time, it's some other way that we're not being real with ourselves or others. So that's why I hope people see themselves, even if they feel like they have very little in common with these characters.
I really appreciated your note to us situating us in Obama's first term. I thought that was helpful, and obviously heard that like in the comments about you can do that, right, in the bumper stickers and the music. I'm curious, like we don't often think about that as a historical novel. That's very different than saying you're going to write a book set wherever for long ago. How did you approach not letting it blur to true contemporary? Because I can imagine that's so much harder when it's close contemporary.
I think it probably helps that when I'm writing, it's a kind of escapism and shutting out. You know, I'm not one of those people who are like, I'm going to hunker down for 3 months and not watch any news. So it's always there. But in the moment when I'm literally writing, I just really immerse myself in this world. And I like this world better than our world. So it's easy to be there and stay there. It's definitely been an escape. Something else that gives me a lot of comfort and helps me immerse is I do a lot of research, and only a fraction of it even shows up here. And my editor made the mistake when she read this through the first time of giving me the note that was like, you know, I forgot that we weren't in the present. And I was like, oh. Hold my beer. And so then we get iPods, and I found out like what was the top 10, and I made a Spotify playlist, and you know, what were the movies and what were the books and what were people reading and what were the fads. There was planking until the second time she read it, she's like, I get it. Nobody's gonna remember planking. She didn't want me to include planking. So planking's not in there anymore. But like that helps too, that I'm immersed even more than in the world of the book when I'm writing it. Like I've done all of that research. Today I had to go and make sure that the description I had of gutting a fish, because I just sort of, I was winging it, because I've never gutted a fish before. And then I went, and so I just tend to nerd out. And so I did that with, the book spans a couple of years. So I was looking at 2010, 2011, and 2012. And there were things I wanted to include, like, oh, this person, died, but oh, she didn't die until a month later. And, so I get lost in it.
Do you find that, like, those details are so juicy and fun, like the songs, but do you find it harder to put yourself back? I mean, you can argue about how much progress or not has happened in feminism, racism, all of these bigger picture topics. Do you really have to try and put yourself back in our cultural mindset around topics like that?
No, I mean, I'm definitely a pop culture junkie. And so now it's more just sort of protecting myself, or as Vanessa would say, protecting my heart. Vanessa will send me texts like, how's your heart? And I have to really work at that in terms of, I'm not sticking my head in the sand, but I just can't have everything coming in. So I read very specific things. So I have an awareness, and it's not too jarring. It's not too jarring.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, same comment of it was really great. I really enjoyed it. But I kind of want to ask, this might be a silly question, but what was your initial inspiration that you, in your head was I want to write this, I want to make this a thing? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I started this novel in 2007. That's how long I've been working on this. I wrote 2 whole other books, since I started this one. The other one, other than Church Ladies, is a nonfiction book on co-parenting that I wrote with my ex-husband. But this book I started it 2 years, so a year after I was officially divorced, divorce decree divorce. And at that time, I was definitely writing my own experiences into a novel. And so initially, Cherise, her name was Rebecca. I have no idea why her name was Rebecca. That's so weird now, but she was Rebecca. And the thing that was the same was that she was married to a pastor who was 15 years older. That part was the same. And she, in the initial incarnation of this book, she had divorced. They had divorced, and they were co-parenting a young child. And I had a friend who's an early reader who read like the first couple of chapters. It was nothing like this, about her and trying to co-parent with this pastor. And she was writing a column for like, Vogue, or not Vogue, like Cosmo or something like that. And she was very sex positive. And then he's this, very conservative pastor, and they've got this child they were trying to parent together. And she's trying to date again, newly divorced. Very much like myself, except I was not married to a pastor, but I was married to someone who is more religious than I am. So that part was true. And my friends, like her sage advice that changed the book and then ultimately like kind of changed my life, she said, this is interesting, but I want to see that marriage, because the character was divorced. And what she helped me figure out about myself as a writer is my first drafts tend to be very low stakes, no stakes. Like there was nothing happening. Like she was going to go on some dates. I don't know. And so I realized, I didn't want to write that marriage because I just left my marriage. I don't want to write about that. But that's where stakes were. That's where conflict was. That was the juicy stuff. And so I pushed time back in the novel 5 years. So she's back in this marriage. And then I had to kind of work my way from there toward an actual story. There was still not much happening. The character was unhappy. It's very hard to write a good book about somebody being unhappy. Like that cannot be the story. Like that's the thing I had to, because the whole thing was she's unhappy, a little scandal breaks out. Oh, is she going to get divorced or is she going to not get divorced? Like that's not a story, that's a situation. So I learned the difference between a story and a situation. And ultimately though, I had to let this character be herself and not me, because those early incarnations, she did everything I would do. I would hate being married to a pastor. No offense to any pastors. I would hate that. And so she acted like I would. And I'm not a big risk taker, so she didn't really take any risks. She was very noble in that, these people at the church, they're giving us their money and they're barely able to make rent, and and they're paying for my lifestyle, and I feel guilty and conflicted. And so I was writing that, and that's really dull. It just is. And my agent helped me kind of get unstuck. She said, well, think about it like this. Her job is to be the first lady. She hates her job. And the biggest question so far is she going to lose her job? Is she going to get divorced? And nobody cares if the character loses a job they hate. Right? They'll just get another job. But if they love their job and they risk losing it, now something's at stake. So I was like, so she has to love being a first lady? I would hate that. Well, she's not me. So Shara became herself, and she loved everything about it. And I started with the fashion of it all. And I did a ton of research. She loves mid-luxury, everything. And so I really leaned into that. And then that's where this first chapter came from, where she's just really kind of reveling in all of it. And so once I let her go to be her own person, then, it turned into something else. I gave her a real scandal, not like, she had an anonymous blog and she got doxxed. Like, that's not a scandal. But that was the old scandal. But in this book, their photos get leaked to the press where it looks like she is involved romantically with Daphne's husband, Jeddah, one of the other pastors. That's a scandal.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated that. That was beautiful.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
I'm sorry my answers are so long.
Can we do two more? Is two okay? We have one person.
Yeah,
sure. Over here. Okay.
I also wanted to say that I love the reading. The humor definitely landed for me.
Thank you.
But my question is, how do you get inspired / motivated to write, either it's just in general, or if you're in a slump and you have to continue, how do you get through that?
So Diamond and I were talking about this today, that, whether it's a slump or people say writer's block, I always say I don't believe in writer's block. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe people get in slumps or they get stuck or, they are not getting their work done. But when we name it something that sounds so neat, it just sounds like, this is something I just have to get over. But when you really pull back some layers, I think the way you get past it is to understand what it is. And I can tell you that rarely happens to me. Like, I'm usually working on multiple things at once. Like, there's just not enough time for all of the stories I want to tell, but I haven't always felt that way. I can tell you some of the things that have held me back in the past and some of the things that people tell me that are common. One is, too often people, and Toni Morrison said it something like this, like, people don't want to write, they want to have written. Right? They want novels, or they want the book. They want the book to just appear, or they don't want just to have a book. They are like, I need to write a New York Times bestseller. If I sat down and told myself that, I would never write, because that is not anything I can control. I can't control if it's a bestseller. I can't control if it wins any awards. I can't control if people like it. I can't control if any publisher is going to want it. The only thing I can do is write the best story that I can write. And often when people are stuck, it's because they're thinking about a bunch of things they can't control, and then they just freeze, because that's a lot of pressure. I've had friends say things like, I have to write this book so that I can get a big book deal and then live off the royalties and quit my job. That would never motivate me. That would terrify me, because that's a lot of pressure. I'm gonna write my book because, no one in my family believes in me, and I had one friend say, and when I write my book and it's on the bestseller list, I'm gonna rent a convertible and drive to my dad's place and show him, and then he'll believe in me. Like, that's just a lot. And so I'm not saying that for you, the weight of the world, that, sometimes it's something smaller. I had a 5th grade teacher who, we used to do when I was a 5th grade teacher, we called it daily oral language, where you put the sentence on the board with mistakes. Do y'all remember that? And you have to pick out the mistakes. And so we fixed the mistakes on the board together, and then she said we were moving on, and I could see another mistake. I didn't realize she had actually made a mistake. So I was that kid who was like, Mrs. Forrest, there's another mistake. And I pointed it out to her, and this woman said to me, Deesha, when you're perfect, then you can speak to me. And I took that to heart, and I became a terrible little perfectionist. And I didn't remember that that's what had happened to me until I started doing morning pages. So if anybody knows The Artist's Way and the morning pages, and you get up at like the crack of dawn and you start writing before you get inhibited and censor yourself, and that story, that memory came out, and I realized, like, I've been holding back trying anything because when I was 10 years old, this woman told me that I couldn't say anything unless I was perfect. Or it's somebody else telling you that you're not good enough, or whatever it is. So figure out whatever that thing is. Don't just call it a slump.
Thank you.
Thank you for your cardio. Thank you. I wanted to say I really adore how you can face the really dark issues that everybody's like, we need to talk about this, but nobody wants to talk about. Very directly and bluntly, but really gracefully.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm curious how you kind of go about that, because I'm a writer myself, and when I do things like that, I just get called mean. So you did it very gracefully, and everybody loved it, and it was still very blunt and direct. Do you feel like there's a way to that, or is that just kind of your voice, and you kind of got to get past the mean calling people, or?
No, I think what I can credit it to is early in the pandemic, writers started getting online and offering writing workshops. And I took a workshop with my friend Rihanna Milcar-Scott. And the workshop was on satire. And I thought, oh, I've never written anything satirical. I want to try that. And I think he was quoting George Saunders, but he was quoting someone else saying that satire only works if you love the thing that you're satirizing. Otherwise, if you're mocking something and you don't love it, you're just sneering at it. And I was like, that gave me something really tangible. I never want anyone to feel like I'm just sneering. Like that's not even interesting to me. And so I wanted to try my hand at that. And so I was like, what do I want to mock or poke at? You know, sometimes it's not mockery, but it's just sort of poking at it, that I also love. And I thought, Gen Z, like that. And again, this was like 2020, you know, the summer of 2020 of all the protests. And these kids were wearing these shirts that said, I am not my ancestors. And I'm like, you're fucking right, you're not. You don't have like nearly their courage or their, you know, self-possession. But what they meant by those shirts was that they sort of internalized the pictures of our ancestors being hosed and having dogs sicked on them and being arrested, and not, to their knowledge, fighting back. They did not see resistance. And I'm like, the best kind of resistance is the kind you don't see coming, but whatever, that's a whole other conversation. But so they believe the propaganda that all of our ancestors were just passive, you know, no awareness of even Dr. King at the end of his life saying, I think I might have done, I don't know that what I thought this was gonna be is it, that he wasn't advocating for violence, but he definitely had doubts about sort of his work and his legacy. So it was ignorance. It's their ignorance. But I am the mother of 2 Gen Z daughters. I absolutely love them. And so that gave me the balancing act I wanted to do so there's some sensitivity, there's some understanding there, and there's some hope that like, I don't necessarily have to talk to you sweetly. I can be blunt, but I also need you to see the evidence that I love you. And so I wrote this story called I Am Not My Ancestors. I'm terrible with titles. Like my story, Peach Cobbler, it's called Peach Cobbler. But the story is called I Am Not My Ancestors. And I, you know, created this character who is not like my daughters, but she's their age, and she was going to protest and doing all these things, and she had the I Am Not My Ancestors shirt. And she awakens, there's a presence in her room, and it's one of her ancestors who has put on her clothes, and she's got this shirt on and her J's and her G's, and she's like, what this mean? And so she has to explain to her great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, you know? And so in there trying to have a conversation with each other about the past and the present, that's where the love part showed up. So that's one example. And then I decided to do the little satire. I made this more satirical than it had been originally. So
Thank you.
all right. Thank you all. Thank you.